welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, here to try to make the world a little more normal one step at a time. Will we accomplish that today? Maybe. It can go either way today, honestly. But, of course, to help me do that, as always, is a guest. And my guest this episode is Gina Linnell Schaefer, author and paranormal investigator. And that's a combo I love. So we're gonna have fun this episode. But first things first. How you doing today, Gina?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I can't complain. Got to play video games all day. Nice lazy Saturday. Love it.
That's nice.
Exactly right.
Hmm.
And besides dealing with the kids, but that's usual.
Yeah.
But so the first question I ask everybody on this show is, what got you into the paranormal?
They dragged me into it. I have been seeing spirits ever since I was a little bitty kid. And so it's like, it's not what got me into the paranormal. It was like getting dragged out of it on Christmas morning when I was 4 years old by a ghost.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Well, if you don't mind, the next question kind of fits into that because it's have you had any experiences with any paranormal entities, whether they be spirits, ghosts, aliens, cryptids, take your pick.
Not so much with aliens or cryptids, but spirits, ghosts. I've been on a few investigations where there are some demons involved. Um, kind of hard to handle, but I get, taught me a lot. So pretty much, I mean, my entire life it's been surrounded by supernatural. I've got to warn you, I've actually been on these podcasts before where there has been spiritual interruption. I personally think they were just trying to show off, but yeah.
It's funny you say that because I actually know two podcasters who have a spirit. Whenever they record, there's always a spirit that messes with their audio or with their video or something. But
They love to do that. And they make lights flicker. I've actually had one time it was pretty funny. A spirit actually talked to me through my cell phone. It's like Siri is telling me the dogs are out, and I get up and I run around, and sure enough, the dogs are out. And then I'm looking back, and then I hear like laughter through it, and and it says Love Keith, which was somebody that had passed away like 2 years before, and he was a good friend of mine. He didn't even know that I, knew how to talk to the spirits at the time, but I guess he knows now.
well, if you don't mind, kind of interested to hear about one of those investigations where you ran to a demon.
Well, I was actually with a team. And I've had a couple of them, but the one that really stood out was I was with a team, and I had a situation where we had a young girl, teenage girl, playing with a spirit board. Well, we know what that's going to lead to. It kind of opened up a portal. And when we went into her house, it was filled with spirits. And one of them was actually her grandmother, and they were very quite talkative. And there was a much younger child that was in the house as well. And the reason why the other spirits were there is they were protecting the younger child, and the younger child could see them. I mean, like I was describing somebody that even the mom was like, oh my gosh, it's just what my daughter described. But there was demonic activity in there, and they will sometimes I was with another psychic, and they will take their form in a way that they think will scare you. And so this one took a form that was almost like with like I guess like bear like with pointed ears. And I, the person, that I was with was a little bit frightened by it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm messed up in the head or something, because I thought it was funny looking. And of course, I started laughing at it and calling it a big wuss and a big baby. So when we did the circle, the power circle around it, I was with our camera person that was on one side, and another person that was also on the team on the other side. And this camera person, she was really young. It was like one of her first investigations, and she didn't realize we didn't know what we were getting into. And bless her heart, because we're telling, do not, whatever you do, do not break this circle. And that thing was digging its claws between us, trying to tear our hands apart. And I had these like claw marks that were like, and it was almost like fingernails digging in. And I held on tighter until the shoes actually went away. And the family actually ended up moving from the place. And believe it or not, it was a trailer. And the thing followed him. So it's still kind of an ongoing investigation, mainly going over there, doing a lot of saging, doing a lot of prayers. We believe that we've gotten rid of the demon, but it could also sometimes it hides. I think it hides when I come over there, actually. They can do that if they know that you have the power to get them to go away. And it's not really my power, it's the owner of the house, which I think she's very fearful. Of course, she's worried about her child. I know the teenage girl to get rid of the Ouija board, but it wasn't until after maybe 3 or 4 times after us being over there before she finally said, "You know what? Maybe there's something into this." So
Yeah, Ouija boards have been a topic of lately on this show because
yes.
apparently people don't realize the danger of them, even though, I mean, they are marketed to middle schoolers though, so who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, in the Victorian age, it was cool to have one. And I mean, it can does work as a portal, but what happens is it's marketed as a toy, and young teenage girls, even myself, when I was a teenager, I played with them, and it was like I had no reason to. I could see the dang things, but I had to show off for my friends, because for a while my parents didn't believe me until I started, telling them things that I knew that I probably shouldn't have told them because I had conversations with some things they couldn't see. But I think it's just a fascination. And even now, my publisher will say, well, you're really into a niche. And it's like, no, this has been going on for ages. The supernatural is there, the paranormal is there, and people are fascinated by them. And I think what's happened now with the world of technology, they have found new ways to communicate with us.
Oh, so that's who all those trolls are on the Twitter pages and the Facebook pages.
Yeah, I do want to think the scammers, definitely the scammers are probably something demonic going on there. Oh my goodness. That is a different talk show.
Yeah,
They are out there.
yeah. Tell me about it.
But it's interesting that you brought that up because 2 days ago, I actually had one of those scammer trolls give me that, they send you that message. Oh, I can feel your psychic energy and I can tell you all of this. And I'm a gifted, God gifted psychic and all of this. And I started immediately getting messages and I text her back and said, look, I'm a clairvoyant empath. I can do investigations. I'll help the police. I'll help people find missing childs, and I'm a writer. And you're about to give somebody some fatal advice. You need to stop. The person said, okay, I'm sorry. I understand. Haven't heard back from them, but it's in my prayers that the woman was listening or man or whoever was behind the photo.
Yeah, I mean, I get those on Instagram probably every other week or so. Like, and it's funny because it's one of the guys was actually on my show, and then like a month or two later, he sent me a message like that, and I'm like, I think he got hacked because I can't see him doing that.
He may have, and that's another big thing too. I worry about that all of the time about getting hacked, especially as I'm building, because being a podcaster, we're trying to build our following, and we're trying, to sell the podcast, sell the book, sell the, whatever it is that we're doing, and then there's hackers out there all of the time.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough I haven't had one come at me yet. Knock on wood, but
Yeah.
guess I'm not big enough for them yet. But I'll watch
Neither
for.
am I, but I have had my photo used for a catfish before, so.
Well, I can't say they ever did that either. But I mean, this face is not a catfish face. I'm sorry, but
Oh, you're being too hard on yourself. You can say
uh,
I've got a face for radio.
well, I do. Hence the podcast. But
Yeah, podcasts are awesome.
I do. Yeah, it is fun. So, what was the? And I don't think you're gonna have one, but what was the scariest investigation you ever been on?
Um, there's actually been a couple. And one was more of an experience. I was like investigating. It was me and my husband. My husband, I kind of drag him along on a lot of things. And I don't know if this was necessarily scary for me, but for him. I was in a situation where we were staying in a place that had actually caught on fire several times. And I got woken up in the middle of the night by a ghost. She wouldn't tell me who she was. She wouldn't tell me anything. I tried to talk to her. My husband's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "There's a ghost in here." And he's just to the point where he's like, "Oh, okay," and he just accepts it. He used to scare the crap out of it. Now he just accepts it. And anyways, I fell back to sleep with the ghost in the room. And then apparently I stood straight up in bed and a voice came out of my mouth that was not my voice. My husband said it was definitely a female voice, but she kept saying a name and it was clearly I got this, whiny Texas twang. He said this was much of a northern deep but definitely female voice and she was yelling out a name. And that really scared him because it was like you were possessed or something. Which that has frightened me because in fact, I was working with one investigation team that wanted to use me for mediumship. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be a human Ouija board. So it frightened me that it was able to take possession of me like that when I was asleep. But after doing some investigation, the name that he was hollering out was not the name of the people that had died there. There was actually 3 people that died there, but the name of somebody that was actually charged for because the place burned down, and she was charged for arson, and she was charged for the death of 2 of those people. And I had no knowledge of this, so it was an interesting experience for me. But for my husband, it was more of a frightening experience. Um,
Oh,
Now, I have had a ghost attack me in the middle of the night, trying to choke me when I
oh,
was staying in a hotel. He attacked my husband as well. And the first night, I just, I was able to get him off of me, but he left bruises up and down my arm. And so it was a notoriously haunted hotel. So, out of curiosity, of course, we went on the ghost tours because I love going on the ghost tours because I got to go back. And also, I like seeing the ghost on the ghost tours because sometimes they tell me what really happened on the situation. And this guy, they were telling me the story of how he was a Civil War soldier, how he lost a limb. Well, what I saw, either it wasn't him or they have the story wrong because he had both of his arms, but he was holding me down, sitting on my chest, and I could not get up, and I couldn't. He held my arm a certain way to where I couldn't get my husband's attention, and I haven't really, besides the demon, I haven't really had one. I've had been touched, had my hair pulled, been played with, stuff like that. Especially for children ghosts because they like to play with the clothes in my hair and stuff because I have real long hair.
yeah.
But this one had enough strength as if he was a full figured body. And I was finally able to arch my back and get him off. And there was another ghost that was in there that appeared to be a nurse that was yelling at him to stop, stop, stop. And that was probably the most frightening for me because I wasn't in an active investigation. He was just attacking me. And but apparently he attacks a lot of people in that room because I've done some research and he likes to hang out in that particular room a lot and attack people in the bed.
Maybe he's reliving some kind of death trauma that happened to him in that room when he was alive.
I'm thinking so because the hotel had been there for a very long time, and at one point it was a Civil War hospital. In fact, there's dead bodies that's underneath it, and so that's why when I'm going through it, I noticed like there were like a lot of nurses. I even had one. I'm diabetic, and one was even telling me your blood sugar's low. You need to check your blood sugar. And sure enough, and so oftentimes I come across some very friendly spirits that are actually very helpful. This guy, though, I'm not exactly sure what he wanted. He wouldn't talk to me after the fact. He was all I could get from him, and I couldn't even hear him. He just showed up in EVP saying, "You need to go. You need to go now."
Hmm. Interesting.
It,
And
it,
it,
it-
it reminds me of that Nicolas Cage movie 1408 kind of, where he's trapped
yes,
where he's trapped in the hotel room and like the hotel room won't let him leave. I mean,
yeah.
kind of similar, but a little different. But
Yes, and there was another one that actually it reminded me of. It was interesting because I don't remember the name of the show, but John Cusack was in it, and I found out years later by watching one of those shows. the same exact thing happened to him, and it was the same hotel, so I'm assuming it's the same room.
Oh,
And
that was 1408. It was
that
John
was 14,
Cusack.
yes.
Yeah.
And it was, what was interesting about it was the psychic that was there saying that, because he checked out, there's this Colonial Park Cemetery that's real close to there. And the psychic was saying that ghost followed him there. And I mean, I've been to that Colonial Park Cemetery often. It's in Savannah. And there are a lot of soldiers and there's a lot of mischievous spirits, but they're really friendly. And he was not followed. I mean, he may have been followed by another spirit, but that spirit was already in that room. And that spirit, it was nothing personal against him or anything like that. It was, I think he was just protecting himself. I think he was still thinking he still thinks he's a soldier at war. Because you got to take in mind, if it's if it's a residual haunting, or even an echo, he's, reliving and still thinking he's in this traumatizing time and may not even be aware of what's going on. That time has passed. Like, it may be 2023, but to him it's still 1777. So, or COVID-1, however you want to put it, because there were a lot of people that died of yellow fever back there.
Yeah, I mean, spirits don't. A lot of time they can't realize time passed. I mean,
No.
the one that lives in my house, I'm pretty sure he thinks he's still alive, and he just hangs out in the garage like he was working on his car back in the old days.
Yeah.
But I mean, he used to come in the house, but I think he got sick of us, so he stays in the garage now. But
We have one. I live on in a neighborhood that was where the Battle of San Jacinto was actually had. Like, that's why the name of the neighborhood is actually Battleground Estates. I don't want to give too much of where I'm at, but the Battle of San Jacinto was actually on this land. And I know when I moved in, I thought he was, at first I just thought he was just a residual spirit, because he just walk up and down the hallway, constantly walking up and down the hallway. And then when I'd be in my study, like, he'll peek in, and I still see him sometimes. But he really didn't start interacting with the family until my son was born. And then, like, my son, if he was in his bouncer or something, you would see the little car kind of scoot over towards him and stuff like that. So then he started, I guess, kind of, I don't know if became attached to the family, but I think he is actually, because he's, I've had friends come over, and like psychic friends that can also see spirits. And like when they'll come up to me, he'll come up behind me and he'll smile. He will come up if there's somebody around, or like a contractor or something that's doing something. It's like he hovers around. I almost feel like he's just trying to make sure that we're safe. So I actually enjoy having him here.
yeah, kind of like a guardian spirit almost.
It is nice, yes, because also, even though I say goodbye and I do everything to make sure that the spirit doesn't follow me home, it can happen. And it's nice to know that that he's got my back in case it happens. And I do believe he's got my back.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. When we had our house investigated when we first moved in, we were told originally it was both the wife and the husband that were in the house, and that they were here to watch the kids. I mean, they learned all
Mm,
this through the divining rods, but
yes.
I don't know how much I trust divining rods because it seems kind of iffy. But
They can actually, if you're using them right, and if you're in around the right energy, they can be actually very helpful. I was in San Antonio, Texas, and I was on a ghost tour. Again, I love the ghost tour. I also am a huge history buff, so I legitimately enjoy hearing the stories. And this one particular guide, he was very theatrical, and I could tell he really didn't know that much as far as how to use equipment. But he was giving people divining rods, and he was only giving them one. And he says, and it will point to where the energy is. And what was interesting, and it really creeped out. A friend of mine was with me, and every single divining rod turned and pointed towards me. And I mean, so it really creeped out my friend that was with me. But we were also by like a haunted location, and I looked to the left of myself, and I noticed that there was a little girl, ghost girl, that was there, that was just kind of clinging along, looking at the crowd. And so that pretty much explains it, because I usually have a lot of spirits all around me, because once they see me, they start talking.
interesting. Hey, Don Vic Show. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you guys watching. But I mean, it's a whole another. I mean, I don't know. I wish I could see him. I wish I could actually see and communicate with the one of my that lives in my garage, so I could see like if his wife's really here. One and two, because my wife can sense him. She can't sense the wife though. I mean, he's playful. Like if my wife's in the basement, like he'll pull her hair or rub her shoulder and stuff like that too, which is
Hmm.
kind of creepy. It pisses me off a little bit, but but still, I mean, and
Well,
my dogs refuse to stay in the garage. Like we put our one mastiff in the garage like back in the summer, and she was whining like someone was trying to kill her. And then as soon as we let her out of the cage, she ran into the house faster than I've ever seen her move.
wow. Well, have you tried talking to the spirit friendly wise and just let him know? Like, just, I mean, it's up to you. Do you accept his existence? Do you want him to stay with you? Or do you want
Um,
him to move on?
that's kind of why I want to talk to him because I want to like see where he's at with that. Because I mean, it's just I mean, I have no problem with him staying. It just as long as he doesn't make my life more difficult by being here.
Okay. It doesn't sound like he is, though. I mean, I know he's probably kind of pissing you off with, messing with your wife and stuff like that. But I mean, if he's not doing anything that's offensive, it sounds like he doesn't mean you any harm. And most of the time, and just in my experience of going on investigations altogether, just in the spirits I run into, they don't mean you any harm unless they feel threatened in any kind of way. But they also take on the personality that they had when they were alive. And if they were a cranky, mean old man when they were alive, chances are they're going to be a cranky, mean old ghost while they're dead. It's just as simple as that. Um,
Yeah, most likely. I mean, you don't unless someone does a complete 360 at death because they're trying to move on and they that doesn't work. I don't think, but you could try.
Yes, yes. But I mean, if he does want to move on, I mean, I think he could probably do it on his own. You could offer to give him some help if he needs to move on. I feel like you would probably sense his wife who was there. If you can sense her, you're more than likely sense her wife, unless she's just being quiet and hiding in the shadows. And some spirits do that.
Yeah, I mean, when the investigators were here, they said that the wife likes to hang out in my daughter's room and watch over the kids because she never could have any.
Hmm. And have you done some background research on that to find out?
I know. I mean, I know they didn't have kids because we are surrounded by their family because the street we're on was owned all by their family at one point. So I've met different parts of their family, and they confirmed that they never had kids. But that's basically all I dug into it. I never really could find anything else on them.
Hmm. So maybe that's true. Maybe she just wants to see the kids. And I mean, I know when I mean, I say the first time that I really remember, encountering a ghost, and it was very frightening. I was only 4, but my mother had told me in the house that we had lived in, they were renting a house in Louisiana, and she brought me home, and she smelled like this real thick cigar and saw this huge thick smoke that was over my crib, and I was just laughing hysterically. And there was this mean old grumpy man that was their landlord, and he died. He was like saying something about how, well, I'll look forward to seeing the baby, I'll look forward to seeing the baby. And he was really nice to my brother. He just didn't like my parents for whatever reason. And he died shortly before, and he was a heavy smoker and had the cough and the whole 9 yards. And of course I'm old, so I was born 70, so they didn't have the treatment that they obviously would have now. And she did go into my room one night, and she was hearing me laughing and giggling as this tiny infant, and she smelt the smoke in there very heavily. And and that was probably really my true first encounter. I just was too little to really remember that.
Of course, I mean, yeah, you haven't hit that part yet where memory
Yeah.
sticks. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, the only grievance I have with them is because we had the chickens in our freaking back of our garage. We had our chickens, and they would stay in the like a coop area in the back of the garage that was already there when we bought the house, and or they started dying mysteriously.
Oh.
We didn't know what was happening to them. It looked like they were flattened basically. We're like, are they falling off the loft somehow? And we had guinea hens in there. We're like, are the guinea hens killing the chickens? But then we moved the chickens out to the shed, and now nothing kills them.
Yeah, something's up with that. Then I've got to tell you, something's up with that.
I mean, when the investigators were here, like like the spirit box kept saying like jungle, and they asked him, "Is jungle in reference to the chickens? Like, do you have a problem with the chickens being here?" And he kept saying yes. And then I had a meeting on my show that actually reached out and talked to him supposedly,
Hmm.
and according to her, he said animals don't belong in the house.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so I mean,
I believe that, and I believe that the chickens were too close because something was happening to them. And of course, chickens are so weather sensitive and heat sensitive. It wouldn't take much to dispose of them, and so if that's that actually sounds pretty accurate. If they don't want an animal in the house, and especially depending, like, I mean, how long ago did he live in the house? Do you happen to know?
he died, I believe, in we bought the house in 2021. I be, yeah, it was 2021. I believe he died in 2019 or 2020. He died from COVID. I know that. Oh, not COVID. I'm sorry. He didn't die from COVID. He died from radon.
Okay,
Because our house had a radon issue we had to get
okay,
fixed. So,
okay.
I'm,
So, yeah, you might even be angry at the house in general, but yeah, I actually, I mean, I haven't spoken to the medium, not being there, not, necessarily sensing anything, but my gut tells me that, yeah, he didn't want the chickens, near the house, not necessarily that he's an animal hater, but there are people that are just like, they don't want animals in the house. My mother was one of those people. Animals don't belong in the house. And so, maybe he felt like too much of a, too much of a, it was too much of a farmyard. I mean, I find it odd that he would call it a jungle, but maybe that's how he seen it as.
well, we had what African guinea hens in there with the chickens too at that time,
Okay.
and they sound like they belong in a jungle. So I mean,
Ah,
maybe that's where that came from. But
okay. He may not have liked the sound. I had a spirit one time that was very frustrated. We were using a spirit box, and it makes that loud, attacking
yeah,
noise and stuff. And he was hollering at me. He was saying, you know, get him to turn it off. It was annoying as heck. And I'm sitting there thinking, really, is a ghost hearing sensitive? But it was bothering him. And I told him to turn it off, and it makes sense to me because maybe it triggered something. I know that when you watch like these paranormal investigation shows on television and stuff, sometimes if they're trying to provoke something, get them, they might play certain kind of musics, they might have certain kind of smells, things may be drawing them out. Perhaps it was something about the sound of them that was just eerily driving him crazy. Might have been what made the wife go away.
it's possible. I mean, I mean, they are the most annoying freaking birds in the world. That's why we got rid of them this
Yeah.
past summer. We sold them to another person who has a bunch of them. That he collects the eggs and sells them, but I think he butchers them too and sells the meat. But we got rid of them because we couldn't stand the noise anymore either, and it was just that at that point, like the chickens got moved to the garage, and then as I'm cleaning the shreddings out of the back of the garage, I find more dead chickens like buried underneath the shreddings. So
Oh yeah.
it was fun. It was such a fun job cleaning that up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Spirits love to move stuff. Um, Sometimes in not a very helpful way. Sometimes that's how they play jokes and stuff. I know we were staying at one place, and my husband had the key. He swore up and down. I saw him put it in his pocket, and he went to the restroom, and then he's like, I can't find the key. I looked everywhere, cannot find the key, and it was in his hat on his head, and he was like, how on earth did they do that? And it's like, I can't explain that. And of course he's looking at me for these explanations, and it's like, yeah, I deal with the paranormal all the time. I can't understand how they can move stuff. I had a hot coffee cup that was actually near my son. Of course, my son, he was about 5 or 6 at a time, but it was near his drawing stuff, and it almost tipped over, and it magically got moved. And I know that the spirit moved it, but none of the coffee was spilled. And so I'm like, well, how do they? I mean, I can understand things like keys and earring. not necessarily the keys under his hat. To me, that was a little bit too weird. But moving things here and there. But there are some things I'm like, how in the world do they manage to do that?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, we've had because I have an Amazon Fire Stick and I had a remote specifically for it.
Hmm.
Haven't been able to find it in 6 months now, and I I literally we've moved every piece of furniture in our living room since then because we had the carpets cleaned and everything, and like it just is nowhere to be found. And I found every other remote that was missing because my daughter likes to hide them too, but I find all the ones she hides. It's this one I just don't know where it could have went. Like I've cleaned every room in this house from top to bottom since then, and it's just nowhere to be found.
They like attics and basements and corners.
I mean, we actually cleaned our basement since then too because we moved
Yeah.
the dogs down there and we're planning on putting a kennel down there. But I mean, we don't really have an attic. We have a crawl space above the garage, but I mean, I ain't going up there.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, they do like places like that though. And even sometimes it's like they're not even really well hidden. Like they'll be just kind of like I'll find things like in the corner and I'll be like, really? You're gonna put it there? Um, Now I did have a situation where I was working with someone and there was a note that was like placed in a book, like that something had gone, like the book had gone missing, and they were looking for. Or it was a note that somebody had written to him that had passed away, and it got slipped into a Bible, and the Bible got moved, or but it was like she saw it on the floor, and it was like way across the room, and she's like, "How did it get there?" And then when she opened it, it fell open. So sometimes there are family members that do truly just they come to visit. My grandfather comes to visit all the time. It just so happens that he was born on my son's birthday. And he's even, because I'll do EVPs and things like that too, so that I can have evidence, but it's also affirmation for me. And a lot of times I'll be trying to talk to the spirit and he'll be butting in and saying things. And so it's kind of cool because, I can recognize his voice and it's like, here he is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This one's not haunting you. He's just, along for the ride.
Yeah, what's funny is we put cameras up recently just to keep an eye on the house, and we also put one up in the garage. And about a week or two ago, my wife like showed me. She's like, "Hey, I just got an alert. This is weird. Look at this." And there literally was a ghost light or flying around my garage.
Okay. Check it closely because you'd be surprised because a lot of the orbs that I checked, especially the ones lately with the digital cams, I'm catching a lot of faces within those orbs. In fact, I've been posting them.
Uh,
Um,
it's posted up on
very,
my it's posted up on my Facebook reels and my TikTok and everything. And but I it's hard because it's moving so freaking fast that the first time it flies by the camera, I almost thought it was a bug or something. Even though it's the dead of winter, it's freezing. I'm like, I doubt it's a bug, but
Mhm.
then it loops around and flies like towards the camera, and you can clearly see the orb shape. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm like, that's definitely an orb. Okay,
What color was it? White or blue or green?
what white, pure
Yeah.
white.
Yeah. They come in different shades, and I've always been kind of fascinated about the different shades. And sometimes it has to do with their aura too.
Yeah, that's what I always thought it had to do with was like their aura or what kind of
Yeah.
spirit they were. But let's move on and talk about your books because after reading the short descriptions of them, I am dying to hear where you come up with the ideas for these books.
Well, what I tell people, because I can't really explain it, is that I have mental stigmata. Um, I do like will sometimes get ideas and put on a storyboard, but honestly, I will sit in front of my computer and I will just start pounding away, and I have no clue where this is coming from, but I mean, it just comes out. And of course, I'll go through the editing process because once because always I'm one of those that I just write it and then I go back and I recheck it and edit it before of course I send it to editors and publishers and stuff. And I'll be in shock, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I wrote that. And even I have a book coming out March 3rd, Sharon's Last Call, and my publisher's been raving on it to the point of flattery. And I was like, oh, he's just trying to boost my confidence. But then I went and read the proof, and I was like, oh wow, I wrote that. I can't, And my husband's read it, and then he was just like, and it's like, where do I come up with the ideas? I don't know. They just pop into my head. And then even when they pop into my head, I don't know what direction the story is going until I'm actually writing it.
That's amazing. I wish I had that. ability when it came to writing. I had to sit there and think about it forever, and I get writer block constantly. That's why I don't write that much. But I mean, even nothing works. I've tried smoking things, drinking things, and nothing gets rid of it. But
You sound like my friend because he was always he teases me. And he actually was one of my beta readers for Sharon's Last Call that's coming out. And his joke was that he's like, Stephen King is admitted to doing drugs and drinking a lot and stuff. He goes, you write this shit when you're drinking iced tea. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me.
oh, Stephen King's Coke years are some of the best years of his writing.
I
But
know. And I have to admit, I have read Pet Cemetery so many times. I think I've read Pet Cemetery once every other year for years. I mean, I like some of his other books too, but that one was just one that really got to me. And of course, The Shining and stuff like that. And I that's what I told my publisher because he wanted to know um, what was my goal, and I told her to scare the crap out of Stephen King.
that'd be amazing.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, it's I live in Massachusetts, and it's been a goal of mine for the last 5 years since I started reading Stephen King in 2017 after I saw it, and I finally said, "All right, I really have to start reading his books in order because this whole universe of his, like I knew for a long time, it was all like the original multiverse of his, and everything kind of goes into each other." So
Mhm.
I started reading it. I got like 10, 15 books in, and then moved in with my now wife and her kids, and it just at that point, no time to read. But
It is hard to find time to read. It's hard. It was hard for me in the beginning to find time to write because my husband was, he's a realist and he's kind of like, well, that's pipe dream, whatever. And so my son, who was 14 at the time when I wrote my first book, and I always had these books and stories in mind and stuff like that. And I used to write when I was a lot younger. He actually did the artwork for the cover Tinny Hall, and I'm currently working on that on the sequel of that now. But I had gotten it published through Amazon, and um, I got Exhibris to do it, and then I took it. I went to my husband. I said, "Hey, you want to see some really cool artwork your son did?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." So I handed the book, and I said, "Oh, and the words inside, those are mine." And then he started taking it to work because he had broken his back at the time. So he was on desk duty. He was a police officer, and he's retired now. But he started reading it, and now he's like, "Hey, look what my wife does." So
yeah, yeah, Tanana. When I was looking at that actually that piqued my curiosity because I'm like, ooh, that sounds like a good young adult series possibility right there.
it, I think so. I know I talked to a producer about it, but they wanted like $50,000, for me to hire a screenplay writer, and I was like, "Yeah, that." After I giggled about that, but Tinny Hall, I get a lot of compliments from Tinny Hall, and that one, of course, there's demonic activity, but you've got this pastor that is actually being attacked or being possessed, sort of like, and he, I don't know how much of the synopsis you've read, but your protagonist of the story is one of them is a young college student who is able to see and talk to spirits. I have my female protagonist, though. She is an autistic mute girl that is the daughter of the pastor that can see the spirits. And so, I mean, I know that was something that I think, has been a big driving point for that book. And so, to the point to now that I'm writing the sequel for it, I am giving her a little bit of a larger part and more in investigation. I love East Texas, so I write about East Texas. Of course, people may read it and think there's some wild stuff going on in East Texas. But I've now Teddy Hall is in this particular book, not to give too much of the plot away, but it's going to be the center, the heart of the book. But there's going to be 5 points that's around it, five town points where there's other mysterious motives going on. That's all connected. So I'm bringing the characters back because one thing is the characters. They're lovable in their own way, except for the antagonist, and he's so evil that you can't help but want to hear more from him.
Sounds interesting, and Definitely, it's going to be in my list of books to get once I actually have a chance to read again in like 10 years when the kids leave. But I trust me, all the authors that have been in my show, I have a huge list of books of theirs I want to read, and it's
Well,
just
send me your information after the show, and I'll make sure that I drop a copy of the book of Tinny Hall to you in the mail. And maybe you'll have time to read it. Who knows? It's that one's not that long of a read. I will tell you the sequel's a little bit longer, but not much.
well, a sequel should be a little bit longer, always in my opinion,
Yeah.
at least because you want more and more the more you read about it. And if I'm
And
not,
that was the thing, but I was worried about overdoing it. It was originally supposed to be a standalone book, but I had too many people saying, no, the story can't be over. You need to continue with this story. So I'm currently working on the sequel. Hopefully, I'm writing the first draft because I've written, a few books in between there. And then I've got a couple of other ideas, but this is going to take place like 5 years later. And then in another following 5 years, I'm going to have, after I'm done with a couple of other books, I'm going to have the third book come out. So, and then that's going to be the end. I mean, people are just going to have to say, okay, you need to get attached to some of these other books.
well, that shouldn't be hard though, because the book you wrote about the Candyman murders was like that. As soon as I saw that, I was like, "What's that now? Interesting."
Now, that is an interesting one now because that is loosely based off Dean Crowell, who was the real, and it's I have it fictional, but I did base it off the real crime, and he is actually buried right down the street from me. And my son wanted to visit some of the grave sites of the people that he actually killed. So we went. Some of them actually are buried where my in-laws are buried, but fortunately, which within good taste, none of the victims are buried in the same cemetery that he is. He's actually buried next to his stepmom. But out of curiosity, I won't take my son there because he's very sensitive too, and I sense that he hovers. And I got some pretty nasty EVPs from him. But what was interesting was I had asked if there was anybody in the in the cemetery that was a victim of him, and I didn't. I just got somebody say my name is say that his name was Michael, and I looked. There was no Michael in the cemetery. There was none of no record of it. Of course, there could be people that he killed that we don't know because we never, because he was obviously killed before he was able to confess to all of his crimes, and he killed before the two boys that started helping him. But when I went there and I took some pictures because the 50th anniversary of when he was killed is coming up on August 8th. And what was really creepy is on a tree that is near his grave, a image of him that looks just like one of the pictures. Like if I hadn't taken myself, I would have thought that somebody would have photoshopped that face onto that tree. And it was like, I did it. I saw that. And then there's an image of a young boy that's underneath. And I actually have that. I probably will be reposting that. Now that you mention it, I need to probably make a note to repost that. But that's just right by his gravesite. And it was so close to an actual image that I saw on the internet that maybe the smile is a little bit different, but it was, I mean, I even had another investigator. I'm like, what do you think of this? And he's like, okay, that one's creepy. So he's around, and I know there's somebody called, I forget what they're called, but they do murder memorabilia and stuff like this, and they actually they sell vials of dirt from serial murders graves and stuff.
Yeah.
And they actually left a sticker on his gravestone because I went back because my husband wanted, he was curious, he wanted to see the gravestone, and he left a sticker, and he was pissed off about that. But there are people around there that doesn't want him there. In fact, I know people alive that once I said, "Oh yeah, he's buried right here," they're like, "I don't want to be buried in that cemetery."
I
he,
mean,
a, he was a bad man. Do some research on him. He was a bad man.
oh, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure most serial killers usually are really bad people.
Yeah. Now, of course, when in my fictional part, I do have it where it takes place in like three different ways. You have um, the 1970s, and you've got the spirit of a young boy, David, who was one of his victims that's not aware he's dead. He's telling his story, and he is still in his mind. It's in the 1970s, 1972 or 73, whatever I made it in there. I think it was 1970, and then I have because and what kind of stirred this up was his house, that house where all these murders occurred. It actually went for sale, and it was on the market for a few months. Um, and so I came up with the idea of a reporter that works in Pasadena. And these are all real places that works in Pasadena, renting the place in 2001 and realizing she slowly starts to realize her house is haunted. But when she goes to sleep, she goes within the veil. So she's guided by the ghost David, who doesn't quite understand that he's dead, who's telling her the story. And then she starts visualizing the story. And then she realizes that, of course, because got to throw in a demon or two. So there's a demon that was actually influencing the serial killer to do what he was doing.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah,
I
and
I mean,
that was a fast read too. It's a very fast read.
I know. As soon as I saw it, I was like, as soon as I saw the synopsis, where I was like, "Ooh, that sounds very Stephen Kingish almost." But I mean, but
It's more Stephen King. Stephen King doesn't. I mean, I know he wrote The Shining and things like that, but he doesn't really deal with a lot of ghost. Just doesn't feel like. I mean, he has that supernatural power in there, but
mm,
and he's definitely very creative. This is more, I think, more of a ghost story.
yeah,
Um, you know, it's not really, you can't really call it a murder mystery. And I do put a disclaimer at the beginning of the book, that talks about, okay, there's, because I wouldn't even use the guy's real name in there, just because it's like he doesn't deserve the credit. Who needs to be remembered are the boys that he murdered. And um,
exactly.
and what really kind of upset me was one of the boys that because he actually paid these young men to um, paid him $200 if for every boy that they brought, and they were bringing in friends that they'd known from elementary school, knowing what that he was going to torture and kill them. And one of the guys is still alive in I think it's Livingston or Huntsville prison, and he shows no remorse for what he did. And at trial, John Gacy was getting all of this recognition, and this guy was actually the first one for to be the first person to be coined as a serial killer. In fact, Truman Capote, when they were pulling up all the bodies, you look at the news footage and stuff, Truman Capote actually came down there trying to find his next story, because he made a huge hit within Cold Blood, and then his career kind of stifled for a while. So he was thinking he was getting his next bestseller, and he took off. He couldn't handle all the bodies that was being pulled, and this guy was like, "Yeah, we killed more than Gacy," almost like he was bragging.
And that's a big brag too, because Gacy
Yeah,
definitely had his share of victims. That's for damn sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I kind of can see why people make martyrs out of serial killers, but at the same time, it's not a healthy practice.
No, no. And that was my thing, is I wanted just people to realize, okay, this is a fictional story, but there were real victims out there that, that moms waiting, keeping the porch light on all night long, praying that their boy would come home. And they never did. And then when the bodies started showing up, and what the guy would do is he actually would have them write write a postcard that said that that they went to Austin, or they went this place for work or something like that. And that part of the story was actually too, he did do that. I just made my ghost person be a little bit, have a stutter and be a little bit slow, so that it would make sense why he would not be able to write the letter. And so it would also make sense to why he was having a hard time comprehending the difference between friendship, because he was thinking this guy's his friend, but he's doing all these other things.
Exactly. And I mean, interesting. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, all your the synopsis for all your books fascinated me, especially
I
your especially
which
your
one?
newest book,
Oh,
13,
oh,
which
the 13th hour, or because I've got Sharon's last call coming too, and that takes place in hell.
I mean, well, the 13th hour. That's the one that came out last year, I think it was, or 2021 maybe.
Yes, the 13th hour. And this one, I mean, most of my books are probably more adult fiction just because, the language and some of the content. But the 13th hour, there are a lot of, I based off because I do a lot of research on killers and things like that. And my key character, her name is Merritt. And, Easter egg, that means gatekeeper. And what happens is the very beginning of the book, she gets in an accident and she has a brain injury. And she meets what she thinks is a nurse, but she ends up being her guide through time. And her name is Alma Chaser, and Alma in Spanish means soul. And what happens is she can only travel during time change. When we lose an hour or gain an hour, that's when the tunnel shows up. And so
Interesting.
she's being pulled through this tunnel through 13 different time periods where she's supposed to learn a lesson. And the idea is that she's there where she learns a lesson. And it got me to doing a lot of research. For example, there's this one where she is in Chicago, but she's in the Polish ghetto part of Chicago, and she's running. It's during Prohibition, and she's running one of those houses and a speakeasy, and then of course a bordello upstairs because the police don't care. But there's a lady that's renting an apartment there that she's a psychic, and all of the neighborhood wives come and visit the psychic. And if the guy's cheating on her or seeing one of the girls that's going in the bordello or whatever, she explains to them that they're going to die. She goes and buys life insurance on the people and encourages the wife to buy life insurance. And then she cooks brownies or something or whether that's going to kill the husband. And so of course, she's a psychic that's predicting the deaths, but she's the one committing the murder. And that was a real person that actually did that. Um, so, and then there's another one where the woman was killing the butterbox babies. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there was a lady in London that girls that they would call in an unfortunate circumstance. They could come and stay there. They would pay a certain amount of money. Supposedly, they would find adopted parents, but a lot of times the woman would kill babies and throw them into the Thames River. And so, even though this is all fictional, there's elements, she runs across elements of true criminals that actually did live in that time and did do that time. So I do put a lot of research in what I'm writing. Try to, even though it's fantasy and sci-fi, trying to make it, a little bit, of authenticity and, interesting, especially if people go to visit those places.
I mean, I like that. I like when fiction books have some real history into them as well because
Yeah.
it makes it more interesting. One of the first authors on, I think she's on my third episode of the show, Brandy Alexander. She started writing she put out the first book already. The second book's written, go through publishing, and third book and fourth book are being written now, I believe.
Mhm.
She, it's a ghost slash demon story, but like it's a Christian story kind of as well.
Yeah.
Basically, this boy you can see ghost grows
Mhm.
up learning like how to use them to help solve crimes and whatnot, and basically he's supposed to be the savior in a demons trying to take over Earth type war.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, but she throws a lot of real life elements into there and history and
Yeah.
stuff, and like the last when the demons broke the lock the last time, that's when the dinosaurs got killed.
Mhm.
Like I like
Well,
I like that she threw that kind of stuff in.
yeah, and it's good, and there needs to be some Christian base because I'm going to tell you there is underlining a lot of Christian base in all of my books, especially in this one that's coming out March 3rd, Sharon's Last Call, but especially in Tinny Hall as well, because you can't have good, you can't have evil without good. You've got heaven and you've got hell, you've got forgiveness and redemption, and sin and forgiveness, and guilt and sin, and you've you've got to have the alternates. And even though, like I said, this new book, it does take place in one of hell's waiting rooms. Um, the premise of it is you've got people that are actually in a coma. The original book was titled Coma, but I had to change it because it was just too common of a title. But they get in some sort of accident, and they're all in different time realms because time stands still there. And when they've come in, they're in the Last Chance Casino, Sin City. They're gambling, they're drinking, thinking they're getting drunk, but they're really not. They're just, time is standing still for them until they get the guts to cross over the Anchored River to get to the bar where the Sharon is at. His name's Gary Sharon, for the ferryman. And
Hmm.
they get their last drink, but within their last drink, which continues to fill up, they get reflections of and echoes of their past lives and some of their greatest sins and their regrets. And there is an element of the things that they feel guilty for, and do they forgive themselves? Are they really showing? And there's some, of course, I'm a horror thriller writer and I'm a ghost writer. So yeah, there's some really horrible things in there that happen. But then they take the tokens that they're given, golden tokens, as they go through, and they put in the slot machine that's behind the bar. Now in Latin, it's mors, vita, or atrium, which means life, live, death, or choice. And they don't know if they're going to heaven or to hell, if the Sharon is going to take them to heaven or hell, until after they put their coins in. And then they find out whether they get to live, go back and live out the rest of their life. They'll have no memory of ever being there. Die, go to heaven or hell. And then there's a few interesting situations where they get to choose. They can choose if they want to go back and live the rest of their life, or if they want to go ahead and just die. And so there's a lot of talk about forgiveness and showing. And now of course the bridges come that they have to cross come to life, and there's demons that spit fire and stuff like that. Yeah, I gotta have that because I love imagery.
Of course.
But there is an underlining, very insightful, some pieces in there. I've had several people that have already read it. Even the publisher himself said it's very introspective, that'll make you really think. And I do have a trailer for it, so I have that posted on my pages and stuff if you're interested in checking it out.
Oh, I didn't see that when I was looking at your page. I'll definitely have to go back and check that out.
Yeah,
But
I need to get a book trailer for Pied Piper's Prince, but I like trailers because people just don't read anymore. They really need to read more, and book trailers tend to grab people's interest.
well, my theory is if I collect enough books, when the world ends someday, I'll have nothing better to do than read. So
That's true. That is absolutely true.
that's my theory. And I mean, if it happens in my lifetime, great. If not, then I guess not so great because I mean I don't want my kids to go through it. But if it happens in my kid's lifetime, at least I'll have a collection of books to read.
That's true. And they can learn some things from our time because our time's pretty cool too.
It was pretty cool. Nowadays, I can't say I really think it's cool anymore. Um,
No, definitely
I,
not.
but I, yeah, I mean, you gotta have that yin and yang perspective, and I like
Mhm.
that about Charon's last call, and also I've talked to people on the show about like who have had NDEs, near death experiences, and
Yes.
a couple of them were given choices about where they wanted to come back or go to wherever they were going after.
I had two NDEs and they said, no, you need to go back. And I even got up to the fifth realm.
Mm.
um, yeah. So the last one was very vivid. Yeah, they were very, very vivid. But I was told, no, you have something to do. And so it was shortly after my last one was when I started writing. And even though I write what I love to write, but there is some faith that comes out of there. So I like to think that maybe that has something, you know, to do with why I was told to come back. But I also know that after my last one, my spiritual gifts intensified like like crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, walking into a hospital is, I mean, it's like I don't get any privacy. So it's yeah, because
interesting.
yeah, so many there. In fact, last I was at one. This was kind of an interesting one. My husband, he's been having some heart issues and he was in the hospital in the emergency room. And I hear the cold red, the code red, code blue, somebody had just
Yeah.
passed. But before I saw the code blue, I saw this old, like this kind of older spirit. He was walking by and I just kind of looked at him. He looked at me, smiled real friendly. And I just kind of mentally said, "Hey, do you need anything? Are you going anywhere? Because I do try to help if I can." He goes, "No, actually, I'm just here for a pickup." And I was like, I just kind of nodded and I wasn't talking out loud because I could hear my thoughts. But my husband, he knew something was up and he's like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Well, somebody's about to die." And he was like, and of course, 2 minutes later, the cold blue, the code blue goes off. And he's like, "I hate it when you do that." I'm like, but it was obviously a spouse going to pick up his wife. And I actually thought it was really sweet.
That is sweet. I, I mean, you really don't think that would. I mean, you hear it happens. I mean, I've had people on
Hmm.
my show before too, where like the one guest I had, he watched his father die in the hospital, and like a couple days before he died, like all of a sudden his father was talking to, and he was like, he was losing his mind at that point, but he's like, "Oh, your aunt's here, your mother's here." Like he kept saying like different members of the family that were coming in, like telling him like it's okay to move on. But
Yes. And that happens. That's very real. It does happen. And like even in hospitals, I'll see that there's loved ones that's with them. And I know when I had my near death experience, the first time around, a priest that I knew when I was a little girl that I loved, loved, loved to pieces, he was one that had come and talked to me. And then there was a nurse that actually haunts that hospital, and I didn't know it was one of her, but she's really friendly and just have a very distinctful type of look about her. And her name is Grace. And she's one of those because she's Native American looking, and she has a very round face, wearing an old fashioned nurse uniform. And so I actually had met somebody who had seen the same ghost. So it was really nice, and it was nice for her to have that affirmation. But she was also there when my son was born, and I was like, "Could you please check on my son?" And she would go back and forth and tell me how my son was doing, and that I needed to hang on and that I was going to be okay because I have a big problem with my pancreas, and they thought they were going to lose me. And then there was another time where I was losing a lot of blood, and she was like, "Nope, nope, nope, you got to hang on." And then when I had left my body, when I had come back, she was one of the first people that greeted me and was like, "I am so glad you're back here."
wow, I mean, so it's not like the Patrick Swayze movie Ghost, where when someone dies in the hospital, they either have like the little Grim Reaper guys come up for them, or you actually see them like ascend.
Not that I have seen. I have seen them walking away. I have the only time that I have actually physically seen the light myself was when I was going into it. And like I said, I did have two near death experiences where I flatlined. One was when I had my baby, and the one was about 4 or 5 years later. And it happened to be in the same hospital, so that one ghost was there. And I do remember it very vividly going up. I remember, being surrounded by love and iridescent, and there's all this music, and I did not want to go back. Um, but I was being pulled back, and I had somebody that was saying, "We need you to go back." And I was like, "Why?" I was under so much pain at the time, and they were like, "You have to go back." And so I would like to think that I was sent back for a reason. Maybe my books are part of it because there is a very spiritual aspect in my books. Even as,
Hmm.
even, when I got people walking over genitalia of the demons, in Sharon's last call, there is a very deep message. In fact, to me, it's very poetic that that it's the release date. And I didn't come up with the release date. It was my publisher that it's actually being released 3/3/23 with,
Yeah, that's pretty. That synchronization right there.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Well, wow. It has been a complete honor having you on, and I so many interesting topics, and my listeners are going to love this episode. I already know it.
oh,
But
good.
tell them, where can they find you? Where can they find all your books? Just
Gina
promote yourself
Linnell.
to the fullest.
Okay, GinaLinnell.com. GINALYNELLE .com. I have my website there. They can look up the synopsis of my books. They can see what's coming up. If they're in the Texas area, they are welcome to come to I've got a book launch that's coming up on March 3rd. That's going to be at the Voodoo Hut in Cuma, Texas, which it's such an awesome motif because one, they tell their story at a bar, and what better place to have it at a place that has a bar with the skull and bones and crossbones and all that stuff around. But they can definitely find me there. And then when I'm booked for signings and things, I do list them on my website. And I love to come out and meet people and talk to them because you never know. That's one thing when you meet me, you might end up being material in a book.
Ooh, well, if you ever come out to Salem, let me know. I'll drive the hour and a half. But
Yeah, definitely. In fact, my next idea for my book after I'm done with this one, it does involve witches.
oh, they always make good subject for books. They do, and
They
there's a lot of history
really,
there.
they really do. And there is a paranormal shop that's not too far away from me in Houston, and they offer witchcraft lessons. And they're like, hey, why don't you come on over? We'll give you a few lessons. So, because like I said, I like things to be very authentic. So I do my research.
Which usually makes books all the better when authors actually do the research for them, rather than just
Yes,
piping them out one after another without really thinking about what they're writing. But
yes.
well, I want to thank you again for coming on. It's been an amazing episode, and I can't wait for my listeners to hear this. And
Sure.
for all my listeners, you know where you can find me. Please tune in next week. Be back in 3 or 4 days with the next episode. And I think I'm back on Monday for all my live watchers with another live. But thank you, Gene, for coming on. It's been a pleasure. And I will see everybody next time.